First, I would like to state off that I don't actually have an audience this time. Have you ever tried to talk to a stranger and thought that maybe they were ignoring you? It's possible they could have been, or they could have in fact actually have been deaf and just didn't hear you. There's plenty of deaf people in our society. Whether you come across someone who is deaf or not, it may be important for you to at least understand why they may behave a certain way. Sign language in deaf culture is something I'm passionate about. Both my parents are deaf, so I grew up learning sign language and I was immersed in their deaf culture with their friends and everyone. So first I will discuss American Sign Language, a little bit about it, and then I will discuss some behavioral patterns and a little about deaf culture, and then at the end I would like to share why it's important for me to want to raise awareness, and I may teach you some signs throughout it. Just like with other languages, sign language has their own dialects, and deaf culture, or deaf people have like their own culture around it. American Sign Language, defined in the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, states that ASL, American Sign Language, is primarily used by the deaf and hearing impaired people in the United States and Canada. Lilo Martin Best states, deaf people all over the world have developed sign languages conveying by movements of the hands, face, and body what spoken languages is conveyed by using the mouth, tongue, and vocal cords. American Sign Language, or ASL, does differ from how we would talk and write in our own English language too. Lilo Martin found that the large variation in word order to be one of the most interesting aspects of ASL. And syntax is the arrangement of words, and with ASL they do follow mostly the subject, verb, object order, but in some cases it may be a little different in some contexts. There's another form of sign language. It's in America, English Sign Language, which is the kind that I mostly lean towards too. My mom has best explained the differences from American Sign Language and English Sign Language. American Sign Language is more like, English Sign Language is more like, I am going to the movies, whereas ASL it would be more like, I go movie. The sentences are a lot more summarized. So there are different forms of sign language from outside of what we have in our own country. There's German, British, Japanese sign language. My husband and I had watched a Japanese movie called A Silent Voice. It's really good. I recommend you should watch it. But it uses Japanese sign language in it, and I was confused watching it because at first I was trying to follow along and catch that I could understand what they were doing, but I do not know Japanese or Japanese sign language, so I did not understand it. And I have it on my PowerPoint here, what the movie is. So now that you know a little about American Sign Language, or sign language in general, there are some behavioral tendencies that are common among deaf people. Kyle had written in an article called Deaf Community Structures and Interaction. He lists some behaviors that are common. The biggest being attention getting and touch. Deaf people tend to touch each other more than hearing people would, because it's all part of like trying to get someone's attention. You would touch someone on their arm or their shoulder. Another one is turning away from someone is usually an insult. But to stay in conversation with someone, if you were to turn away from a deaf person, you would usually tell them to like hold on, or you would hold their arm so as you're turned away, it's not like you're completely ignoring them and being rude. So facial expression is another big part of sign language too. My dad had once was fired over some facial expression he had made towards his boss but it's a big part of how they communicate too, because they can't communicate using their voice, so how they feel and emotions are really expressed on their faces too. Deaf culture is something that is also highly celebrated among the deaf community. In an article written by Holcomb titled Deaf Culture, he's found that a core value of deaf people is to have a healthy identity. They don't tolerate self-pity or sympathy for being deaf. It's something they're proud of. Another tendency of deaf culture, is the tendency for straight talk, where typically a deaf person will be very blunt in what they're trying to say as well. And that stems from history of having a hard time of trying to gather information, especially from non-signing people. Okay, so now we've gone over some behaviors. I want to explain why it's so important to me and why it's something I want to raise awareness for. So the reason I want to spread awareness is so people can have a better understanding when interacting with someone who seems like they could be ignoring you. One story I have of this is my mom and my stepsister had gone grocery shopping. A woman had thought that my mom was in the way of something and tried to ask my mom to move, but my mom, being deaf, didn't hear her. And so the woman in the end took her shopping cart and rammed it into my mom's shopping cart. And my mom was so startled and confused at what was going on. But luckily my stepsister was there, and she was able to stand up and defend my mom. But the woman was they had told me the woman was so apologetic afterwards, especially for causing a scene in a grocery store. And then, you can't always tell a person's obviously deaf. They may not always be wearing a hearing aid, but it'd be a good idea to observe the person before making a rash judgment on them. There's plenty of deaf people around us. Spartanburg is a big hub of deaf people. We have the Spartanburg, there's a school for the deaf and blind in Spartanburg. My mom and my stepdad actually both work there. So did my husband's aunt at one point. There's a university, Gallaudet University. It's a private school for the deaf and hard of hearing, and that's located in Washington, D.C., and I have their school names and logos here on my PowerPoint. So, I can demonstrate some signs. My mom has best said that the best way to learn is to start with the alphabet, because there are some words that don't have a true sign to them, and so you may need to spell something out. Okay, so here's the alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. And then the numbers are a little different too. They go 1, 2, 3, and I'll come back to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 3 has to be done in this manner, or way, because this is 6 in sign language. So if you go up to a deaf person and you go 3, like this, they might confuse it for 6, because it's a bit similar to 6. So 3 is done in this manner. Okay, and I have it here up on my PowerPoint, and you can study it, go over it, and there's plenty of sites you can Google to learn sign language too. So today I had discussed American Sign Language, and then I had discussed some behavioral tendencies of deaf people. And then finally I had explained the reasons I want to spread awareness, and hopefully maybe I taught you all a little something about sign language. Sign language and deaf culture is one thing I'm passionate about, and I wanted to share you all some things and help spread some awareness. So now that I've taught you all a little something, I hope you all can maybe help spread some awareness, and next time someone or a stranger seems to be ignoring you, perhaps not take offense to it, because they could actually be deaf. Thank you.